Some people don't need to speak loudly to make a room go quiet. Their presence alone speaks volumes. It's not about arrogance or ego. It's a silent strength, a kind of intensity that earns attention without asking for it. Some respect it, others fear it, but no one ignores it. This video explores that presence, the kind that doesn't seek approval but stands firm in who you are. You'll discover 9 signs you may have a strong, even intimidating personality. Not because you try to dominate, but because you live with clarity, conviction, and calm. Through Stoic philosophy, we'll show how this is not a flaw, it's a force to master. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And being one means living by values, not validation. So if you've ever been told you're too much or too intense, this video is for you. Like it, subscribe, and let's uncover the strength you already carry, quietly, powerfully, and without apology. Number 1, you have an undeniable presence. You walk into a room and something shifts, not because you're flashy, not because you're loud, but because your presence carries weight. People feel it before they understand it, and that's what makes it powerful. It's not noise, it's gravity, it's not performance, it's rootedness. The Stoics would describe this as inner stillness radiating outward, a silent signal that says, "I know who I am." Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." This strength doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need applause. It isn't derived from followers, titles, or noise. It's cultivated through discipline, through reflection, through living in accordance with your nature, not the expectations of others. And when someone does that, truly others take notice. They may not know why they're drawn to you, but they feel your clarity. That's presence. But presence, paradoxically, also makes people uncomfortable. Because most individuals aren't used to being around someone who isn't performing, who isn't chasing approval, who isn't fidgeting with identity. Your calm becomes a mirror, reflecting their restlessness, their inner disarray. You don't say a word, yet your silence unsettles. You don't boast, yet your composure confronts. And often people react, not to you, but to what your presence reveals about them. This is why Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Because once you stop trying to manage impressions and start living with quiet integrity, people will project their discomfort onto you. Some will respect you, others will resent you. But few will remain neutral, and that's the burden of presence. It attracts attention, but not always affection. A powerful modern example of this is Steve Jobs. His presence was magnetic, not because he forced it, but because he believed in what he was building with unwavering clarity. Whether or not you agreed with his methods, people in the room felt his intensity, his vision, his obsession with simplicity. He didn't have to raise his voice. His focus created tension, his silence created weight. That's not charisma, it's conviction. Another timeless example is Eleanor Roosevelt. Known for her quiet power and uncompromising principles, she did not conform to the expectations of her time. She wasn't loud, yet she changed the tone of every room she entered. Her influence didn't come from dominance. It came from moral clarity, intellectual depth, and emotional maturity. She didn't need noise to lead, her presence did the work. And conviction is not noisy. It doesn't need to be. It rests in stillness. It speaks through action. When your life aligns with your values, when your thoughts no longer betray you, and your emotions no longer control you, then you become someone others cannot quite place. That mystery, that strength, it's not intimidation for its own sake. It's the energy of someone who has stopped pretending. But let's be clear, this presence isn't superiority, it isn't coldness. True presence is warm but firm, receptive, but not bendable. When you listen fully. When you speak, you do so with precision. And when you move with intention. This kind of person changes the atmosphere not by dominating it, but by anchoring it. So if you've been told you make people uneasy or that your energy is too much, understand this. You may simply be living in alignment when most people are still searching for direction. And as the Stoics taught, your task isn't to be liked. It's to be true to yourself, to reason, to principle. Because the moment you live from that place, your presence will do the speaking. And that's more than enough. Number 2, you are rational, not a follower. There is a quiet power in those who think for themselves. Not the kind that argues for the sake of ego, but the kind that refuses to be pulled by the tides of emotion or popular opinion. You don't just react, you reflect. You don't get swept away by the crowd, you observe it. This is not rebellion, it is clarity. And in a world that rewards noise over nuance, your calm reasoning stands out like a lighthouse in a storm. According to Stoic philosophy, independent thought isn't just encouraged, it's essential. Epictetus urges students to think clearly, act with reason, and remain anchored in what is true. This is the essence of rationality. A Stoic doesn't surrender the mind to the herd. He pauses, he questions, he chooses deliberately. He's not concerned with what's trending, he's concerned with what's timeless. But here's the truth most people won't admit. Clear thinking can be threatening. When you don't mirror their emotional outbursts or join their outrage, people may accuse you of being cold. When you refuse to jump on a bandwagon just because everyone else is on it, they may call you difficult. But what they're really reacting to is this. Your mind is not under their control, and in a society obsessed with conformity, that kind of mental freedom feels dangerous. Most people take comfort in consensus. They feel safe when others agree, even if what's being agreed upon is shallow, false, or harmful. But when you calmly question it, not to provoke, but to understand, you disrupt the illusion. You shine a light where others have chosen darkness. You expose the hollow beliefs people cling to just to feel included. That's why rationality, when lived fully, often looks like rebellion. But it isn't. It's simply refusing to lie to yourself. Consider Marcus Aurelius himself as emperor. He was surrounded by flattery, politics, and groupthink. Yet in his private journals, he constantly challenged his own assumptions, reminded himself to remain logical, and warned against becoming a tyrant of the mind. His strength was not in his title, but in his ability to remain rational, fair, and self-governed even in chaos. That is the power of the examined mind. We see this today in figures like Charlie Munger, the late investor and thinker who partnered with Warren Buffett. Munger was known not for charisma, but for clarity. He once said, "A majority of mankind is irrational. I just try to be rational." His success wasn't magic, it was disciplined thought, quiet discernment, the refusal to follow the crowd off a cliff. That is Stoicism in action. But rationality isn't cold, it isn't rigid. True Stoic thinking is paired with empathy. You understand emotion, but you're not ruled by it. You listen, but you don't blindly absorb. And when you speak, your words are chosen, not thrown. That makes you different. It makes you grounded, and yes, it makes you intimidating to those who need the crowd to feel strong. So when others mock your stillness, your logic, or your refusal to jump into drama, stand tall. You are not behind, you are ahead. You are showing what it means to be ruled by logos, not impulse. You are a rare kind of person in a reactive world. A thinker and thinkers, though few, shape the world long after the noise has faded. Number 3, you don't need others' validation. There's a certain stillness that surrounds a person who no longer seeks approval. It's not indifference, it's not arrogance, it's freedom, a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your value, without needing it to be echoed back to you. This is rare, and in a society built on likes, follows, and endless feedback loops, it's downright disruptive. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." That single insight reveals the trap most people live in. They know what's right for them, yet they bend their choices to match someone else's expectations. But the Stoic breaks that pattern. He returns to himself, not to isolate, but to align. When you no longer chase validation, something powerful happens. You stop performing, you stop adjusting your tone just to fit in. You stop filtering your truth to be more palatable. And while this may sound liberating, it often threatens those around you, because your detachment from their approval exposes just how dependent they are on it. Your independence isn't loud, but it's confronting. You become a living reminder of the freedom they haven't yet claimed. Let's be clear. This doesn't mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop depending on their applause to feel whole. There's a difference, in fact. When you let go of needing to be liked, your relationships often deepen. Why? Because you show up more honestly. You're not calculating every word to win favor. You're present, real. And that authenticity allows others to meet you where you truly are, not where you pretend to be. This trait can confuse people. When you're not visibly seeking approval, they may call you cold, detached, or self-important. But what they're really sensing is your self-containment. You don't orbit their moods, you don't contort your values to match their preferences. And that quiet resistance to people-pleasing makes waves. Even when you say nothing, you represent what they've abandoned, their own inner compass. Consider someone like Joni Mitchell. She famously walked away from fame multiple times, refusing to compromise her art to fit what the industry wanted. Critics didn't always understand her. Fans sometimes complained she changed too much. But she didn't flinch. She followed her inner compass, not the applause. And years later, those same critics came back, recognizing her as one of the most original voices of her time. Why? Because truth eventually commands more respect than popularity ever could. This is what the Stoic means when he talks about self-sufficiency, not isolation, but integrity. You don't reject society, you simply refuse to be enslaved by its shifting approval, Seneca wrote. If you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to what others think, you will never be rich. That richness is what you're cultivating, an internal wealth that no praise can add to and no insult can subtract from. And the best part? It doesn't vanish when the room goes quiet. It grows stronger there. So when someone tells you, you don't care what anyone thinks, take a breath and say, no, I just don't need them to approve for me to move forward. That's not pride, that's peace. And in this noisy world, peace is revolutionary. Number 4, you have a strong moral code. People who live by a clear set of principles often unsettle those who don't. Not because they preach, not because they condemn, but because their consistency highlights the contradictions in everyone else. You don't have to announce your values. Your silence says enough. In a world that bends its ethics to fit convenience, your refusal to compromise stands out like a mountain in a sea of shifting sand. Stoic philosophy places moral clarity at the very center of strength. For the Stoic, virtue is not optional. It is the essence of a life well lived. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple, sharp, uncompromising. That kind of internal standard is what builds real power, not power over others, but power over oneself. When you align your actions with your highest values, you create a kind of internal coherence that doesn't waver under pressure. But here's the catch. When you carry that kind of integrity, you don't just inspire others, you unsettle them. Why? Because your presence becomes a mirror. It shows people what they've let slide. You don't shame them, yet they feel exposed. And often, rather than reflect, they react. They call you rigid, unrealistic, even self-righteous. But what they're really saying is this: you live by a code I abandoned long ago, and that makes me uncomfortable. The Stoic doesn't moralize to control others. He disciplines himself, and that discipline becomes a form of quiet resistance. You're not led by trends. You're not guided by fear. You do what's right, even when no one's watching, especially then. That's what separates integrity from image, and what separates self-possession from performance. Look at someone like Fred Rogers. The world saw him as kind, and he was, but his kindness wasn't passive. It was active, fierce in its gentleness, grounded in belief. He lived his principles so deeply that even those who disagreed with him couldn't question his sincerity. He didn't weaponize morality. He embodied it, and in doing so, he disarmed cynicism with consistency. That's what moral courage looks like. Not performance, but presence. Not perfection, but persistence. Seneca once warned, "He who seeks wisdom must be prepared for ridicule." Living by a strong code often means walking alone. It means being misunderstood. But the Stoic does not need applause to walk the right path. His compass is internal, and because of that, he may feel the sting of isolation, but never the rot of self-betrayal. Having a code doesn't make you perfect, it makes you anchored. When temptation knocks, when chaos rises, you don't flinch. You return to your principles, not because it's easy, but because it's right. That return, repeated over time, becomes identity, it becomes clarity, it becomes peace. So if people have called you too strict, too idealistic, or too intense, pause. Ask yourself, is their discomfort a reflection of your clarity or their confusion? You're not here to blend in. You're here to stand firm. Your moral code is not a cage, it's a foundation. It doesn't imprison you, it protects you. And in a world full of noise and shifting rules, that kind of clarity doesn't just intimidate, it elevates. It reminds others that character is still the highest form of power. Number 5, you don't mind being alone. Solitude doesn't scare you, it strengthens you. You're not running from people, but you're not dependent on them either. That alone makes you different. In a world wired for constant stimulation, silence feels like a threat, but to you, it feels like home. You've discovered that real clarity is rarely found in crowds. It's found in stillness, in space, in solitude. And because of that, you walk through life with a presence that feels calm, because it was forged in quiet. To the Stoics, solitude was never something to avoid. It was something to cultivate, Seneca wrote. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. That belonging doesn't happen through popularity or constant validation. It happens when you learn to sit with your own thoughts and not flinch. When you face your own contradictions, and instead of turning away, you integrate. That kind of self-familiarity creates a depth most people never reach, because they're always surrounded, always distracted, always escaping. But here's what most won't say out loud. Your comfort in solitude makes people uncomfortable. They assume you're cold, they assume you're antisocial, but what they're really sensing is your emotional independence. And in a world where attention often masquerades as affection, that independence can feel threatening. It says, I don't need you to complete me. I've already found myself. That message delivered in silence is louder than words. And that's the deeper truth. You don't enter relationships out of emptiness. You enter them from fullness. You're not looking to be rescued or entertained. You're looking to connect, and connection for you doesn't mean constant presence. It means mutual respect, quiet understanding, the ability to share space without having to fill it with noise. Most people confuse that with detachment, but you know the difference. You know that holding space for yourself is not a rejection of others. It's a foundation for being fully present when it matters. This is why you often set boundaries others find confusing. You cancel plans not out of flakiness, but because your energy is sacred. You say no, not to reject others, but to protect your peace. And that level of inner discernment becomes intimidating to those who have never sat still long enough to hear their own thoughts. Take someone like Audrey Hepburn. Beyond her beauty and elegance, what set her apart was the stillness she carried. She was never desperate for the spotlight, and she often withdrew from it, choosing a quieter life rooted in service and reflection. Her strength wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. That's the power of someone who has befriended solitude. They don't need to announce their worth. They radiate it. Marcus Aurelius, too, wrote his Meditations not for the public, but for himself. In quiet corners, between responsibilities, he wrote to return to what mattered. That's what solitude does for the Stoic. It resets the compass. It clears the fog. It creates room for wisdom to emerge, not from noise, but from reflection. Wisdom, after all, doesn't shout. It listens first. So if people don't understand your silence, let them. If they misread your boundaries as walls, don't rush to explain. You've learned something they haven't yet faced. That peace is not found in always being available. It's found in being deeply connected to yourself. You're not avoiding the world, you're just refusing to lose yourself in it. And in that refusal, you found something priceless. Peace that doesn't beg to be seen, it simply exists. Strong, quiet, unshakable. Number 6, you can have difficult conversations. You don't fear discomfort, you face it. While others tiptoe around hard truths or sugarcoat reality to avoid friction, you walk straight into it, not to dominate, not to provoke, but to understand, resolve, and protect what matters. This willingness to have difficult conversations, to speak with calm precision when others go silent, gives you a kind of power that most avoid, because it requires you to be both brave and grounded. To the Stoics, this kind of courage was essential, Epictetus taught. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. In other words, emotional control in hard conversations is not a byproduct of personality. It's a result of inner work. Most people avoid discomfort because they think it will protect peace. But the Stoic knows avoidance doesn't protect peace. It postpones chaos. That's why you choose to speak up. When there's a misunderstanding, you clarify. When boundaries are crossed, you name it. When something feels off, you bring it to light. Not to create drama, but to clear the fog. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't want the fog cleared. They've built their comfort inside it. So when you shine a light, they call it confrontation. They say you're too intense, too honest, or too blunt. But the issue isn't the truth. It's the fear of having to face it. Still you speak, not to shame, but to protect, not to escalate, but to ground. Your goal isn't to win the argument. It's to preserve the relationship, the standard, or the boundary. And that motive, when clean, gives your words weight. Because they come from stillness, not ego. From concern, not control. Brené Brown built her life's work on this principle. She speaks about hard things, shame, accountability, emotional boundaries, not with aggression, but with clarity. She reminds us that real connection can't exist without truth, that difficult conversations, when done with respect, are not divisive. They're healing. She calls it clear as kind. And she's right. Vagueness preserves feelings, but kills relationships. Clarity may sting, but it saves. Another quiet master of difficult truth was Mr. Rogers. His conversations with children and adults alike were firm yet gentle. He didn't avoid tough topics, death, divorce, anger, fear. He met them with compassion and honesty. That's the Stoic way. Clarity, not cruelty. Presence, not performance. Marcus Aurelius said, "Let your speech be the common speech, but let your life be the life of a philosopher." In other words, speak plainly, but let that plainness carry truth. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. You just need to mean what you say. And when you do, people listen. Not because you shout, but because your calm reveals what noise hides. So if people have called you too direct, pause before defending yourself. Maybe it's not that you're too much, but that they've never been taught how to face the truth without fear. Your willingness to have hard conversations is not a flaw. It's a sign of integrity, a sign that you care enough to get uncomfortable, to protect what's real, and to seek peace without pretending everything is fine. The Stoic doesn't avoid hard conversations. He prepares for them, he delivers them with composure, and because of that, he doesn't just speak clearly, he lives clearly. And in a foggy world, that kind of clarity is intimidating, not because it wounds, but because it heals with honesty. Number 7, you stand out in group settings. You don't try to be the center of attention, but somehow people notice you anyway. It's not because you speak the loudest or take up the most space. It's because your presence carries weight. In a room full of noise, you are still. In a group full of performance, you are real, and that contrast, subtle yet unmistakable, shifts the energy around you, even when you're silent. This is what the Stoics referred to as living in harmony with your nature. You're not performing. You're not manipulating. You're simply grounded, Marcus Aurelius put it simply. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. And in that quiet being, without announcement or explanation, you embody something rare. Authenticity. And authenticity, especially in group dynamics, reveals what is not. People can sense when someone is deeply rooted. They may not know what it is, but they feel it. Some are drawn to it, others are unnerved because your calm forces a recalibration. You don't join in the tension, you dissolve it. You don't chase attention, you redirect it, and without saying much, you become the standard others quietly adjust to. Even your silence becomes a kind of leadership. But here's the paradox. The more you stand firm, the more others project onto you. If they're insecure, they may call you arrogant. If they feel small, they may say you're intimidating. If they're used to being validated for noise, they may resent your silence. It's not because you've done anything wrong. It's because you've disrupted the emotional economy. You don't compete for status. You don't trade in validation. And in most group environments, that makes you hard to categorize. The Stoic doesn't walk into a room to dominate it. He enters with purpose, with presence, with stillness that is felt, not forced. Think of someone like James Baldwin. His voice didn't rise with emotion. It dropped into silence. He spoke not to overwhelm, but to reveal. He didn't posture. He didn't perform. He simply stood in his truth and let that truth do the speaking. That's the power of presence when it's rooted in principle, not performance. Another modern example is Michelle Obama. She didn't need theatrics to command a room. Her posture, her pace, her deliberate tone, all grounded in clarity and emotional intelligence. She stood tall not because she tried to impress, but because she refused to shrink, and that refusal alone became a form of quiet leadership. In group settings, your power is not in being louder, it's in being clearer. You listen when others rush to speak. You speak when there is something worth saying. You don't compete, you calibrate, and that calibration often reshapes the entire space. Not because you control it, but because you refuse to be controlled by it. So if people quiet down when you enter, or shift their behavior when you observe, know this: it's not fear, it's resonance. You've brought something still into a space that thrives on chaos, and in doing so, you've reminded people, without saying a word, that groundedness is possible, that integrity is still visible, that presence, when aligned with principle, speaks louder than performance ever could. The Stoic doesn't seek the spotlight, but when he enters a room, the room changes, not because of noise, but because of the power of someone who no longer needs it. Number 8, your words carry weight. You don't speak often, but when you do, people pause. They lean in, not because you demand their attention, but because your words are different. They're not noisy, they're not reactive, they're rooted, and in a world addicted to speed and surface, your calm delivery feels like depth. You don't speak to be heard, you speak to be understood, and that shift in intention changes everything. The Stoics treated speech as a form of moral practice. Epictetus said, "First learn the meaning of what you say and then speak." In other words, don't speak from impulse, speak from understanding. To the Stoic, a word is not just sound, it's responsibility. Every sentence should carry thought behind it. Every conversation should be approached with care. And when you follow this principle long enough, something interesting happens. Your words start to carry weight without effort. But this kind of speech is rare because most people don't listen to think. They listen to reply. They speak to fill silence. They talk to be seen. So when someone like you enters a conversation, measured, present, intentional, it shifts the atmosphere. It reveals how scattered the rest of the room really is. Your silence, paradoxically, becomes louder than their noise. Not because you're trying to dominate, but because you're tuned in to something deeper. Truth over performance. And here's the truth. When your words hold weight, not everyone will like it. Some will say you're intimidating. Others may say you take things too seriously. But what they're really saying is this: you're not playing the game. You're not speaking to be liked. You're speaking because what you have to say matters. And that kind of energy is rare. It makes people reflect, even when they don't want to. That discomfort they feel, it's the tension between who they pretend to be and who they could become if they were more honest. Think of Maya Angelou. She didn't speak fast. She didn't speak often. But when she did, the room changed. Her tone was gentle, but her presence was fierce. Her words didn't seek attention. They commanded it. Why? Because they were born from lived experience, shaped by solitude and delivered with grace. That's not just communication, that's legacy. Her restraint gave her voice more power, not less. Or take Robin Williams in his quiet moments. Not the performer, but the thinker. When he slowed down, when he wasn't on, he had a depth that surprised people, a raw honesty that made them pause. His laughter carried weight, but so did his silences. He showed us that humor and depth are not opposites. They're companions when used with self-awareness and soul. The Stoic doesn't use words to control, but to clarify. He doesn't flood a room with speech. He offers stillness within it, because he knows what is spoken carelessly is quickly forgotten. But what is spoken deliberately, when it comes from stillness, principle, and presence, can stay with someone for years. One sentence can outlive 10 speeches if it's born from truth. So if people pause when you speak, don't shrink from it. If the room quiets when you share your thoughts, don't rush to fill the silence. Let your words breathe. Let your tone remain steady. You've earned the weight behind your voice, not through volume, but through restraint, through experience, through reflection. In a world full of talkers, Be someone whose silence means something and whose words mean more. That's the Stoic way. Not more noise, just more truth. Number 9, you are decisive and direct. You don't linger in uncertainty. You observe, you assess, you act. And in a world that delays, doubts, and deflects, your decisiveness becomes a quiet kind of rebellion. People are used to indecision. They bond over hesitation. They normalize avoidance. But when you move with purpose, it confronts their inertia. Your clarity exposes their fog, and that's why your decisiveness isn't just noticed. It's often misunderstood. To the Stoics, decisiveness was never about ego. It was about alignment with principle. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter." In that sentence lies a world of wisdom. Once you've identified what is right, delaying becomes a subtle form of fear. And fear, if allowed to fester, becomes paralysis. The Stoic doesn't indulge it. He meets it head-on with disciplined action. Yet directness comes with a cost. Because when you speak plainly, others assume you're cold. When you make quick calls, they say you're reckless. When you don't soften the truth, they call you rude. But you're not here to perform softness. You're here to practice honesty. And most people confuse the two because they've grown up in a culture that values politeness over truth, that praises harmony while it hides discomfort. But you don't hide. You speak clearly and calmly, not to dominate, but to clarify. The Stoic doesn't speak to manipulate emotions. He speaks to reveal principles. And that kind of speech has gravity. It slows the room. It quiets the noise. It forces people to consider not just what you said, but why they have avoided saying it themselves. Look at Steve Jobs. Whether or not you liked his approach, he was decisive. He didn't ask for consensus. He asked for clarity. He saw what others couldn't because he moved when others hesitated. His decisions weren't always popular, but they were effective. His directness wasn't cruelty, it was focus. And focus, when unshaken, creates legacy. Or think of Eleanor Roosevelt. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. Her words, especially on issues of justice, were not dressed up. They were delivered with moral precision. She understood that history doesn't remember those who stayed polite. It remembers those who stood firm. Even Oprah Winfrey, often known for grace and empathy, shows fierce decisiveness behind the scenes. Her public warmth doesn't cancel out her clarity. She knows what aligns and what doesn't. And when she sees it, she acts. That's Stoic. That's strength. So if you've been told you're too blunt, too fast, or too intense, listen to what's not being said. Maybe your clarity is highlighting their confusion. Maybe your momentum reveals their stagnation. And maybe your refusal to dilute truth is precisely what makes your leadership necessary. The Stoic doesn't apologize for clarity. He takes ownership of it. He doesn't demand perfection. He demands alignment. And in a world that talks in circles, his straight line becomes intimidating. Not because it's aggressive, but because it's rare. Decisiveness is not about being right all the time. It's about being honest enough to choose and responsible enough to adjust. It's about moving forward with integrity, even when certainty isn't guaranteed. So walk with direction, speak with clarity, and act without flinching. Because in a world built on hesitation, the Stoic shows us what it means to move with intention and never look back. If you've recognized yourself in these signs, know this. It's not arrogance. It's not intensity. It's power, rooted in clarity. You're not intimidating because you try to be. You're intimidating because you refuse to betray yourself to make others comfortable. And in a world that rewards performance, your presence is a quiet revolution. But remember, true strength isn't about proving anything. It's about protecting your peace, honoring your values, and showing up with calm conviction. The Stoic doesn't chase applause. He moves with purpose, and when he speaks, when he acts, when he stands, he does so with intention. If this resonated with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. This isn't just a philosophy, it's a path of fewer words, stronger choices, and peace that doesn't flinch. Stay rooted, stay quiet, stay true.